Gude! In today's technical walkthrough, I would like to show you one of the frequently asked questions on the Coqui community. How do I run a pre-trained Coqui TTS voice model on Microsoft Windows? And if you do not know Coqui TTS, it's an open source project and they provide tooling around text-to-speech, from training your own text-to-speech model up to run a pre-trained model. And these models, they can run locally, so offline, no cloud dependencies, and they provide a great quality because their training is based on machine learning, or to make it even more fancy, on AI, so on artificial intelligence. And how you use these cool voices on Windows, this is what I'm going to show you today.
Gude! Hacky, techy, nerd stuff. Open voice enthusiast. Open voice, open future.
But before going into the tech, by now, so this is September 2022 and Coqui's latest release 080, there are 16 languages supported with pre-trained models right away. Some of these models even provide multiple TTS models. If you are interested on samples or are interested how these voices sound, I will link a video I've made on this as a audio sample comparison in the description box below. But before we can run a pre-trained Coqui TTS model, we have to satisfy some dependencies before. First, we need a Python version, at least version 3.7 up to 3.10. In this test, I'm going to use Python version 3.8.10. And we need some Microsoft Visual Studio Build Essential Tools or some SDKs. And last but not least, we need eSpeak or eSpeak-ng for Windows, because some of the models are trained using eSpeak or eSpeak-ng for Pneumonizer.
So let's start with our technical walkthrough on how to use pre-trained text-to-speech Coqui models on Windows. In my case, I'm using Windows 10, but it should work on other Windows as well. I tested this setup before taking the actual video, so hopefully I can show you an error-free process, but I will tell you something about the exceptions I've run into and put some helpful links in the description box below. So first, let's start by taking a look to a GitHub page from Coqui TTS, and in that install TTS section you can see that TTS is tested on Ubuntu 18 with a Python version between 3.7 and 3.10. But as we are on Windows, let's take a look here to that Guy Paddock. Shout out to you, Guy Paddock. He wrote some instructions here. So let's open that here. And we can see on Stack Overflow some steps he has documented. I will just take apart from that a few steps because he documented on how to train a TTS model on Windows. But today I'd like to show you how to use the pre-trained models. But if you are interested on training your own text-to-speech models on Windows, please let me know that in the comment box below. And he recommends using Python 3.8, and I totally agree with Guy Paddock because the 3.7 is the minimum requirement, 3.10 is the latest supported release, and I think a version in between, like 3.8, should be fine. And there is another requirement apart from Python 3.8. We need eSpeak or eSpeak-ng because some models are trained with eSpeak or eSpeak-ng as Pneumonizer, and some are trained using Groot. If you would like to use a model that depends on Groot, there's no need to use that eSpeak installation. But if you use a model that is based on eSpeak, we should install, or we have to install, that eSpeak-ng release. So let's start by satisfying that dependency and installing the package for the Microsoft package. So let's download this. Yeah, looking good. So, and now let's install. installation successful. And now we have satisfied our first requirement for using TTS pre-trained models depending on eSpeak. There is another dependency, obviously, that is Python. So let's open a PowerShell. I'm going to run it as administrator. And let's see if we have Python installed at the moment. And as you can see in this creepy encoding German message, it is not installed at the moment, but I can install it using Microsoft Store when I remove that command line argument. So this should bring up Microsoft Store to install Python version. But that's just one possible option. But I prefer installing it manually, so I'll close the Microsoft Store and let's jump to python.org. Click on the Downloads Windows field, and I'm using version 3.8.10. So let's search for that, Python 3.8.10, and download the correct package. In my case, it's the installer for 64-bit. So once this is downloaded, let's run the installer. And here are a few points to think about. On the first side, I'm going to add Python 3.8 to my path environment variable. And let's that launcher active and click Customize Installation. And here you can see pip will be installed too, which is required for installing the pre-trained TTS package. So let's go next. I'm going to install it for all users. You can install it in your local user space, but I'm going to install it for all users and download debugging symbols and some libraries. I've run into some struggles when I've not installed some additional libraries. So click all of the available options here and install it. Setup was successful. Close it. So let's check our Python version now. Python version. As expected, we have Python 3.8.10. And in addition, let's see if we have a correct pip. So for installing the Python packages version, which is 21.1.1 at the moment. So this is looking good so far. So let's switch to my user profile. And what I would like to do is I would like to create a new directory, an empty directory for that TTS. So let's go to new folder TTS. Let's switch into that folder. Empty as expected. And personally, I prefer using Python virtual environments, but it's up to you. But if you use multiple projects or multiple environments, I think you would agree that virtual environments isn't too bad to use. So let's run Python with module vn in that new TTS directory. To use this, there's a PowerShell script called activate ps1 in that scripts directory. When you run it by default, you might figure out an execution policy exception. I will link a Microsoft knowledge base article in the description box. So you have to adjust by running set execution policy to enable running these type of scripts. So I've done that before, so running activate should work well. Yes, and as you can see by that prefix here, which is basically the directory name I'm in, or I've created the Python virtual environment in, is I'm now into that TTS virtual environment. What I'm doing now is I print a list of all available packages at the moment, so you can see that pip is installed in version 21 and setup tools in 56. I would like to update pip install pip, the setup tools package, setup tools, and wheel, which is useful or required for the installation of the TTS package later on, with that -u for updating. So now let's check pip list. And we now have pip not in version 21 anymore, but in version 22. And subtools is increased in the version also, and wheel is installed as a new dependency. So before installing our TTS package, we have to install some of the Visual Studio build tools, because in my tests I've done so far, I've run into a dependency that base std header files was missing. So I had to install that dependency. I'm going to show it to you. So I've run the Visual Studio build tools. Let's change it. And I've installed these desktop development with C++ and the .NET desktop build tools, which bring in some of the required dependencies. So I've done this before, but just in case you might have to do this yourself. So now let's go to our Python package index and search for TTS, and let's scroll down to this TTS, and you see the latest version is version 0.80, and you can just copy that to your clipboard and install it. Personally, I prefer giving an explicit version number, such as by default it would take the latest version, but in case there is a 0.90 to be released, then you can choose a prior version by entering that explicit version number. So let's run pip install TTS in version 0.80. So this worked without any error. So seems I resolved all the dependencies correct. But before we synthesize voice, let's just take a look to pip list again, and we should see that TTS package is installed in that version 0.80, and we have a PyWorld in version 0.210. And I figured out that running PyWorld in that version on Windows, at least in my setup, didn't work out as expected. So I installed that pip or PyWorld in version 0.37. So let's run this again. Pip install PyWorld in version 0.30. Let's run pip list again, and we now have PyWorld in version 0.37. So that should be all for the installation. Now let's see, we have a command called TTS-server, and now you can take, or this can take an argument called --list models. And when you see this list, you're mostly done. So congratulations to that. Let's just see this English model here, this DDC model. As you can see by this already downloaded hint, I've done or used this model in my tests before. So if you would like to choose one of these existing multi-languages models, so English, French, German, Italian, and so on, you can just run a TTS-server argument model name and just put in that path from the list. If you choose a model for the first time, it will download the TTS model, and depending on the type of model, the voice encoder model. And if you see this message, a local web server has been started on port 5002. So let's jump to our browser and open localhost 5002. And here we are. So Coqui's simple web front end is up and running. So let's see, this is just a sample. Coqui on Windows. So Probably you couldn't hear it because I'm using an RDP session, so audio isn't put through, but I will link this sample at the end of the video. And there is another way to synthesize audio apart from that web front end. So let's terminate that process. We can just run TTS without that server model name. Let's print the same. Let's give it a text. This test is from command line. And let's take it an out path, which is output WAV. Super creative. So now it's synthesized in the background and the output has been saved to that output WAV file. And just for the fun, let's use it with my German Thorsten-Voice model. So I'm going to take the, at least in my opinion, best model, or from all my personal trained models, is the DDC model. So let's run the TTS server process with model name again, and let's use my DDC model. So again, has been synthesized and you can hear the result at the end of the video. So that's all. I'm going to show you how to use pre-trained TTS models on Windows. If you liked that video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please think on subscribing to my channel. This would really help me and the channel a lot. And again, thank you all for watching my videos, commenting and being part of my great YouTube channel community. So thank you, stay healthy, stay safe, and if you like, we might see us next time. Bye!
This is just a sample using Coqui on Windows. This test is from command line.
Dieser Test zeigt, dass die deutsche Thorsten-Stimme auch auf Windows funktioniert.